Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I apologize for my voice. It's my husky Brenda Vaccaro. Someone lodged a tampon in my throat voice as a result of, who knows, drinking heroin. I don't even know anymore. Whatever. You're the Hollywood guy. So.
Are you, have you got a cold? Or you're just,
it's something, it's all in like the top of my lungs. So it's nothing but phlegm and coughing, but I feel fine. So I feel like I could run a marathon, but I would be hawking out small goblins as I went.
God. Well, that's disgusting.
Is that bad? Should we not include this in the podcast? I'm not sure. Really? I'm like the world's worst podcast host because I almost never do like an intro. I just start it in medias res, kind of like I've done now with the legendary Andrew Klavan. And by the way, I'm thrilled that no matter what, I don't have to have a Klavanless weekend because I've got you here on my podcast.
There you go. That does help.
So how did the legendary and Klavanless weekend theorem begin? Was this something scientific, or were you approached by a gypsy on a street corner? One day you'll be cursed. Tell me about Klavanless weekends.
Well, it actually just started from observation. I was watching every time I would go off the air, there would be a disaster. I can't remember what it was. Some of it was the hurricanes down south. There were political disasters. And I just started to realize that the country could not survive without me. I mean, it was just a question of observation.
It's interesting because some of us who listen to your podcast think that that's the disaster. And so we're not sure.
That may be true. Just because things are bad doesn't mean they can't get worse.
Exactly. That's a very good way to put it. Hey, by the way, I'm having you on for one reason only. I told my wife I would distract you while she does something at a hotel. No, I'm having you on for one reason only, to promote the Another Kingdom podcast. So that is going to happen. Okay. It's coming up.
All right.
But I do want to ask, since you do a great podcast with, the gang over at the Daily Signal. Is that
Daily Wire?
Daily Wire. I mean. And is that the umbrella that you guys? Is that kind of how you and Shapiro and everybody hang?
Yep, we are all me, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles. We all have our podcast on the Daily Wire, which has now become one of the monster sites on the internet. Amazing,
it absolutely is. And I love the sign outside into the studio, the He-Man Woman Haters Club. I like that. You guys have that right there.
Yeah, no girls are allowed.
You and Spanky and Stymie, and you have the power is like a dog on a wheel chasing a cat on a wheel. I love that.
That's it.
You guys have everything. So you talk about news, current events, etc. So what is the state of the Republic in the view of Andrew Klavan?
The state of the Republic is unbelievably good. This is when I was just talking about this on my show, is that, because people, including me, dislike Donald Trump so much, and because we predicted so many terrible things might happen if he became president, no one has really noticed, except for the people who are slavishly Trump followers, but no one has really noticed that this has been the best year politically for conservatives since Reagan, unquestionably. No question about it. ISIS has been destroyed, and you say you don't want to give Donald Trump credit for that. Well, Jim Mattis said in April, I think it was, he said, Donald Trump has told us to go destroy ISIS. And they did. They wiped out ISIS in Syria and Iraq and Iran. And that's amazing. 60 judges have been nominated, all of them approved by the Federalist Society, all of them constitutional originalists. Regulations have been rolled back amazingly. The economy is doing great. If this tax bill passes, I think the economy will go through the roof. And the mainstream media is in a shambles. The mainstream media is in ruins because of Donald Trump. I think this has been one of the best years conservatives have ever had, which means it's one of the best years that America has ever had. And I think a lot of people can't see it because one of the ways that Trump governs is through chaos. And he has this funny communicating style that works for him, but is very off-putting to some of us. And so we don't notice that things are actually doing great.
So let me point out why you're completely wrong. No, I'm kidding. Actually, you're saying something that I try to remind myself of regularly, which is life is just pretty darn good for Americans who get to live in 2017. And despite all the political Sturm und Drang, it's really, the economy's in pretty good shape, and people are pretty happy, and the technology that we use every day and don't think about, the ability to get a terrific future for your kids. It's all as far as like, if one of the things about your dramatic podcast, Another Kingdom, is it puts the main character from modern Hollywood back into the whatever Game of Thrones-esque era. And it's just yet another reminder of, man, if you have to be alive on planet Earth, and some would argue you don't ever want to have to do that, but if you ever have to be alive on planet Earth, this is a great time to do it.
It is a great time. It really is. And when you look at the science, the way that food production is exceeding the population growth, the things that we're developing that are right around the corner, the ability to cut costs for medical care because so much of it will just come through our iPhones pretty soon. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was within 3 to 5 years. We'll be able to scan ourselves with our iPhones, do all kinds of medical things that way. It really is remarkable. And what you are seeing, even some of the atmosphere of division and craziness and chaos that you're seeing is actually the result of a good thing, which is that for the last 50 to 60 years, the left has owned the means of communication. They have owned the movie business. They've owned the TV business. They've owned the news business. They've owned the academy. And partly through Donald Trump and partly just through this kind of revolution that's taken place technologically with guys like me. You mentioned another kingdom. That really wouldn't have happened in the old days if I didn't have access to put up my own podcast, just throw it up there and see what developed. And there was a revolution going on, and what you are hearing, a lot of the chaos you're hearing, a lot of the disgruntlement is the mainstream media dying.
Well, it's time for people to get gruntled again. That's what I think. Make America gruntle again is my motto.
Make America gruntle again. We're
talking to Andrew Klavan, one of the stars of the Daily Wire podcast. By the way, I cannot explain this, Mr. Klavan. I have a dog. Actually, my wife has a dog, one of these little Shih Tzu, Cavalier, Spaniel, indoor battery fake dogs. Since our conversation begun, he ignores me when I'm doing this stuff. He is staring at me intently, trying to hypnotize me. He is so affected by the sound, the dulcet tones of your voice. Do you have this effect on animals?
You remember the old RCA dog, yes, his master's voice? That's what it is. He hears it.
My dog's name, by the way, is Hans Blix. I'm not kidding. Blixie. Hey, Blixie.
Really?
Hey. And if you are not appropriate on my podcast, he will send you a very sternly worded letter. That's coming up next. But so why is you mentioned why you think it is people are fighting it means communication. You can get more fights out there. I also think in some ways we're so spoiled. We used to be able to grasp the idea at some level that there were just, bad things were just going to happen. That's part of life. I mean, think about the way that our parents and grandparents grew up. They had a good chance of dying in childbirth. My uncle, my dad's in his 70s. My uncle was bitten by a rattlesnake when he was 2 because they were in the rural South on a farm, and he almost died. I mean, that was commonplace. Now it's, I ordered this pizza and 30 minutes are late. Yeah, it's been 32 minutes, damn it. I blame Trump. I'm like, man, life is so good. Enjoy the good part. But people can't let go of the idea that if everything's not perfect, then everything is crap.
Well, and so much of our feelings are due to contrast, due to what we experience one day compared to the next. I mean, CNN did a piece yesterday or today that could have come out right out of The Onion about the terrible, terrible trauma that 26-year-olds are going through as they fall off their mother and father's insurance plans. And I read that and I thought, let's see, Christmas 1944, you'd have been fighting the Battle of the Bulge, you little putz, It's like, and I think, I really do think you're right, Michael. There are just times when you have to go in the bathroom, look in the mirror, and just slap yourself so hard in the face that your eyeballs roll around. Because you have to remember this, if you were born in America today, it's probably like winning the lottery of life. And I think that, you can complain and maybe things are going bad for you personally. Of course, people still suffer terrible tragedies. Right. And I don't mean to make light of that at all. But just as in terms of the general population, the way things are going generally, it's going great. And for conservatives, it's going terrific. I mean, this is really if they had told you a year ago that government would be rolled back, that regulations would be rolled back, that we'd be getting conservative judges, you just wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the tax bill, as big of a mess as it is, the fact that it is fixing one big glaring problem, which was that our corporate tax rates were ridiculously high, and it was literally driving businesses away. Even Barack Obama proposed cutting corporate tax rates to 29%. But this, to me, is one of the many, many examples of the partisan moment we're in, Klavan. If Republicans said, okay, we want 21 Obama wanted 29. Let's split the baby and we'll do 25. Not a single Democrat would cross over because they're not voting against the policy. They're voting against Donald Trump, the guy. And you said earlier that the media had been destroyed. I disagree completely. The media is destroying itself. It is the media that is holding the ball-peen hammer and going, bam, bam, take that, bam. And you just, okay, guys, knock yourself out, literally.
Well, this is part of Donald Trump has a magic power. I've never seen this before in any other. I've never seen it before. He has the power to make people destroy themselves. And you go back and you look at Marco Rubio during the primaries when he started talking about hand size and he just made himself look absurd. You look at Ted Cruz, who was trying to outsmart Trump and couldn't believe that Trump was outsmarting and outmaneuvering him. These are people I like, by the way. I'm not running them down, Rubio and Cruz. Hillary Clinton, basket of deplorables, that line. And now the mainstream media, when you look at the couple of weeks that CNN has had, that is, as you say, you're absolutely right, is completely, unforced errors. But Donald Trump has that effect on people. People just race at him and find themselves skewering themselves. And it's kind of, I mean, for me, it's a joy to watch because I have to say, I despise our news media. I do not think it's right. I simply do not think it's right. And I don't despise MSNBC because they come on and say, we're leftist. Here's the leftist news. That's fair. I don't despise Fox because they say we're rightist. Here's the rightist news. I despise people who say this is all the news that's fit to print, or we're the most trusted name in news, or who put forward the idea that this is the news and then just spew leftist propaganda day in and day out. And after 8 years of watching them coddle Barack Obama, who I believe was one of the most corrupt and incompetent presidents this country has ever had, and watching them bury that and hide that because of their racial pathology, it's just a joy to watch them destroy themselves.
Klavan, you are the darkness that democracy is. I can't believe you said that.
I am.
And once again, I disagree with you some as far as the measure. For example, I think Obama was wildly more incompetent than he was corrupt in the traditional sense. But it's so frustrating to present. So I'm a contributor on CBS News. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is I try to get them to talk about stories like, for example, what's going on with the FBI investigation right now. And I keep having to gently nudge them. You don't have to be, a Alex Jones survivalist food in my basement, dehydrated water guy to see that there's a problem when everybody on the team that's investigating Trump hates Trump and donated to Democrats. That's not some bizarre cranky theory. That's the kind of thing that used to be kind of news-like. And you see them, they don't want to agree, but the vestiges of news judgment are there and they're walking towards it. You just have to gently coax them back towards journalism, Klavan.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it must be 10, 15 years ago, I wrote an op-ed in the LA Times where I said, if you want to fix the news business and you want to get your audience back, hire some conservatives. Because what all these news outlets say is they say, well, even though we're Democrats, we can be fair. That's not true if everybody around you is also a Democrat. Right. It is simply the confirmation bias is too strong, too many people reaffirming your beliefs. No one to say what you just said to me. I will bet you it's CBS News and, you work there. I know you don't want to run them down, but I will bet you that there is not one middle manager who voted for Donald Trump. Not one guy that you have to get your news story through. There may be reporters who did, because reporters are kind of oddballs. But when you get to the place where your story has to be vetted and got pushed on into the next stage and get on the air, I'll bet there's not one of them who voted for Donald Trump. So there's no one to sit next to you and say, you know what, you're being unfair. I've worked in newsrooms. I've been a reporter. If somebody doesn't call you out and say, from my point of view, this is a good thing, and from my point of view, this looks like this, then you don't have to accommodate any other opinions. And that's the problem. And it has been a problem now, at least since Reagan, because they've gotten more and more and more partisan. And we see it. I mean, the people at CNN actually look at their faces. Look how hurt they are by people attacking them and by Trump attacking them. They actually think they're being fair, and they actually think they were fair with Obama. You say he wasn't corrupt, and he certainly wasn't corrupt in the old-fashioned way where you were doing things to get personal profit. He was not. He was corrupt like any Chicago Democrat pol. He stacked his people. He stacked his organizations. He used them without fear or favor of the Constitution. When you shut down people's speech with the IRS, that's corrupt. When you're attorney general is meeting with the other party's candidate. That's corrupt. And they just didn't cover it. And they didn't cover it because there was no one there to say to them, we're not doing this right. And if nobody's going to argue with you, you're never going to change your mind.
Great point. And, you've seen all these scandals with PBS and NPR with Charlie Rose and Tom Ashbrook and other, there was Tavis Smiley, all have perv problems. And, I spent 15 years in radio. We have two NPR stations in Boston, both of them 24/7 liberal content, zero conservative content with the tax dollars. And so I contacted a buddy of mine who runs this, says, you can maybe solve this perv problem by putting a couple conservatives on. And the answer was, we'd rather have the pervs. So that's.
Did they really say that?
I'm exaggerating slightly.
Yeah, all right, but it's close. Yeah.
So which brings us to another kingdom, which is loosely based on your life. Because my understanding is at one point you were in fact transported back into the 1500s. No, because you worked in Hollywood, and I understand that you're going to get a gig in Hollywood again because there won't be anyone left who hasn't touched someone inappropriately, and so there'll only be like 3 people left to work in Hollywood.
I told my agent that I was shocked to find out that I was the only person in Hollywood who hadn't grabbed anybody. And I feel like it was typical of me to get into the grabbing women business just as it's starting to collapse, But another kingdom has been one of the truly exciting projects for me. I mean it sincerely. Scott Immergut from Ricochet came to me and said, "Would you do something for us?" And I said, "Well, would you do fiction?" And he said, "Absolutely." And the thing is, it's really hard to reach conservatives in the fictional world because they turn to the mainstream media, which is left wing, for their cultural news. They still get their cultural news from the mainstream media. Right. So this was an end run around that. This is what I hope eventually will be published as a novel. But we published it as a serial podcast. And you're right, it's about a guy who is trying to make it in Hollywood and it's just not going right. And one day he walks through a door and not only does he find himself in a bizarre fantasy world, he finds that he's a murder suspect there and is immediately put on trial for his life. And so it has worked out so well. I think it's got over 200,000 downloads now. It's something like 50,000 unique downloads in a month, and it's got 1,400 5-star reviews. People have really been enjoying it. It's just been incredibly gratifying because this is the place. Conservatives are not good with culture. Right. They don't get it. They don't get why it's important. They don't get why they have to support it. And you have to be a very independent, very tough-minded artist to get to say, no, I'm not going to go over and serve these left-wing guys. I'm somehow going to get my arts out to the world and serve what I know to be the truth and a true vision of the world. It's tough. I'm not complaining because it hones you and it sharpens you according to the best conservative principles. Self-reliance actually makes you better, and capitalism actually makes you better. But it is interesting that conservatives just tend to panic about what the next thing is. Oh my God, if they pass Obamacare, the country's going to collapse. Right. If they pass this, if they don't close the border, the country's going to collapse. So when you say to them, yes, but if you don't make any movies, if you don't make any TV shows, if you don't write any novels, 20 years from now, nobody's going to vote for you. They're like 20 years from now, but the country's going to collapse today.
Exactly.
And Andrew Breitbart understood this. This is how we became friends. Breitbart used to say that every 4 years they come to you and say you have to give $1 million to a little congressional district in Ohio or the whole country will collapse. But nobody ever says, make sure you have a movie studio, make sure you own a woman's magazine, make sure you have a review venue where these movies can get good reviews. And that's how we lose the culture.
No, I culture, politics, downstream of culture. Breitbart was absolutely right about that, et cetera. And so I'm a listener to Another Kingdom. And I swear to God, if the end of this is one of these stupid Lost Island things where the guy's blinking and it was all in his eyeball, I will track you down in your West Coast hovel, and I will hurt you. Okay.
As a person who stopped watching Lost because after 5 episodes, because I knew they couldn't explain it, I'm very careful to make sure that everything makes sense in its magical way.
So they lost me at Smoke Monster. I don't know what episode that was, but it's that Smoke Monster. Because I'm like, no, now you're stupid. Come on, this was so interesting. Don't do it. But, isn't that classic J.J. Abrams though? He starts off with a really good idea and then has no act 2. He's like, I don't know how to get out of here.
It's funny. My son-in-law used to say, no, they're going to figure it out. And I used to say to him, I do this for a living. I know exactly the point where it's either a dream or the guy has died and is, in limbo. And I said, they've gone way past that point. So yeah, you have to plan ahead.
One last question for you, because I've taken up far more of your time than your therapist allotted me, so I apologize, and I know you have to get your Thorazine shots
Absolutely.
in a second. How many episodes will Another Kingdom take us?
It's going to be 13 for this season, and now that it's done so well, we're hoping to bring it back I hope to bring it back for 2 more seasons. But episode 10 drops tomorrow on Friday. And
which is today when this podcast airs.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry. It's sorry. Episode 10 drops on Friday, and then each Friday until we've got 13, and that'll be the first season.
See, that's interesting to me because the multiple seasons. I'm interested in what's your next project? I'm a churn and burn plot guy. I want to see. Give me a new character, a new something totally new, always new. Klavan.
I'll be doing that too. I actually have another a novel in the works that I may just go right to publication with.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Michael in the Morning podcast. I truly appreciate it. Great job on Another Kingdom, and let's talk again soon.
All right, thanks a lot, Michael.